So different kind of video today. Since crypto's been on ice for pretty much all of 2023 and AI, ChatGPT's been on fire, I decided to ask ChatGPT to give me a good allocation strategy to earn dividends using JEPI and JEPQ. So JEPI basically is an ETF by JP Morgan that invests in the S&P 500, and these are mainly low volatility value stocks, most of them being large caps. And what they do to earn income is that they sell call options, and this is a relatively low risk strategy of hedging, mainly because you already own the stock. But what that also means is that when the stock price rises, JEPI will also lose the price rise, lose the income that they would get from the price rise if that happens. For JEPI, their strategy is to basically hold the stock but sell covered call options. So their main way, their cash cow, their way of making money is literally through selling call options in that covered call strategy. JEPQ, on the other hand, focuses on high quality US companies with a strong track record of paying dividends. So they are really focused on growth here, but at the same time, they're also focused on companies that pays dividends. And they have a very strong quantitative method of finding the companies that does this and have a very strong balance sheet as well, whether they be mid caps or large caps. So guys, recently I ran a poll that asked you guys what you guys were most worried about. And number one was inflation not earning enough, and number two was what to invest in. Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but things are not going to get better. That is why I am looking into side hustles to help me boost my income, even if just a little bit. That's what side hustles like YouTube is for. But if side hustles are not your thing, then dividend investing might be, which is why I'm making this video, right? And some good dividend ETFs are JEPQ, which pays 12.31%, and JEPI, which pays 12.16%. So it might help you a little bit when it comes to earning a little bit more to help with your income goals. The most important thing I want to say is you have to take action. But right now we have JP Morgan and other big national banks being basically too big to fail, which is good for products like JEPI and JEPQ, but sucks for all the regional banks and their shareholders, because it literally looks like the government, which is supposed to be protecting us, and they kind of are, they're kind of protecting the people in place of letting the regional banks die. So the people you voted for to go into office to represent you kind of are doing their job, but ultimately this is gonna look really bad, which is why you're watching this video from a YouTuber who's trying to preach the facts. And if all this makes you feel behind, less secure, anxious, nervous, it should, because that's exactly what I feel too. And I use that to fire me up to take action. And if that's one thing that you're gonna get from this video, it's to take action. So there are only two things that are certain in life: death and taxes. And Seeking Alpha reported that apparently 80 to 85% of JEPI's dividend income is reported as ordinary income. That means that if you don't have them in a tax sheltered account, you're gonna get taxed up the wazoo. So make sure to get those ETFs, that JEPI and the dividend income, in a tax sheltered account like a Roth or a 401k, just so you don't have to pay the government. But if you're doing some trading or something, then go ahead and start an account with Moomoo. You can get up to 15 free stocks if you open an account and deposit up to $2,000 with Moomoo using my link in the pinned comment below. And right now the banks are falling one after the other, so keeping $2,000 in your Moomoo account and trading when you want to doesn't seem like a bad idea at all. Now, I don't know about y'all, but once I turned 30, I became super conservative. There was just a big change, and that's compared to my 20s, because in my early 20s, I took a lot of risk because I didn't understand the macros, I didn't understand the interest rates, I didn't understand how things work, even though I thought I did. And one of the scariest things was actually when you had a good night with a girl and you didn't wrap your tool. Man, that night you just aren't able to sleep, and the next day, the next morning, you are just terrified. So now that I've become a bit smarter but not smart enough, I had to ask ChatGPT how I could invest $500 monthly and how I should allocate them between JEPI and JEPQ in a more conservative fashion. So this is the answer that ChatGPT gave me. Note that you have to be firm when it comes to ChatGPT and it comes to investments. So I just have to say I've decided to invest $500 monthly, and only then will ChatGPT actually give you a strategy. And the strategy for the conservative bias is that you're gonna allocate $350 to JEPI and $150 to JEPQ each month. And that makes sense because if we take a look at JEPI here, the assets, the allocation here is pretty even. I mean, everybody has in top 15 holdings basically 1.5 to 2%, right? Hershey holds the biggest share of the pie here, and then comes Microsoft, Pepsi. But what we do realize is that a lot of these companies are staples. You eat chocolate. Microsoft, everybody uses it for work, right? People drink Pepsi. We have to use MasterCards. We have to have health. And last but not least, we have to use Amazon for all our shipping and shopping needs. Now, if I was a more aggressive investor, ChatGPT recommended me to go the NASDAQ bias allocation. That is when you have a strong belief in the growth potential of the technology sector, which for now, guys, I do not have that belief. So they basically suggest to have a higher allocation in the NASDAQ 100. So this basically switched around with 350 in JEPQ, 150 in JEPI each month. So if you take a look at JEPQ, the holdings here are very skewed. Microsoft and Apple holds 25% of everything else, right? And then Google, and then Amazon and Nvidia. Let me tell you guys, I'm a software engineer, and all of these guys, they're competing against each other, right? So we don't really have a cohesion here. So that is what really worries me. And tech right now is not doing so hot. So this is, I feel like it's the wrong time to really be very bullish on tech. So I, in this case, would be leaning more towards conservative rather than aggressive right now. So I would probably pick the conservative bias rather than the NASDAQ bias. Now that I'm a little bit older and a little bit wiser, another thing that I was worried about is rising rates. So I had asked ChatGPT, what are the disadvantages that the two ETFs have in this economic situation of rising rates? And according to ChatGPT, both JEPI and JEPQ are dividend paying stocks. So that means that when interest rates rises, bond yield increases. And what that does is that it entices investors to flood into bonds rather than keep holding dividends. So that is not only individuals, right? That is both individuals, companies, institutional investors. They're going to be taking advantage of this, and that will lead to the ETFs decreasing in price, and maybe even companies paying lower dividends, which means a lower dividend yield. So what ChatGPT recognized is that markets can be volatile in these economic situations of rising interest rates, right? Whenever there is an FOMC meeting where they decide on whether or not to raise the interest rates, the markets always get jittery and it always goes up and down, up and down. And because of that, those covered calls, that covered call strategy that JEPI and JEPQ relies on, it might come back and bite them in the butt. What's worse is that JEPQ have a massive investment in tech, and if we've been following the news with what's happening in tech, there's been layoff after layoffs after layoffs, and that is worrisome because it makes you wonder, all right, what's going to happen to these tech companies? They're going to survive, but will they thrive is the question. If you guys are going to take one thing from this video, it's this. If you own JEPI or JEPQ or thinking about buying them, please make sure to put them in your tax shelter account so you don't get owned by the government. Other than that, guys, if you want to learn how I earned $17,319 on my taxes using ChatGPT and AI, check out this video right here.